Here I am. I have arrived. I can see me, see my timer. Erin is here. Hi, Erin. Hello. Welcome. We're having a gorgeous day. Still chilly, but it's pretty anyway. Nice and sunny. No rain. Yay. Unlike last week. A couple more people are showing up. Carla says, hi, Siofra and Ian. Happy pink moon. Our rain stopped here too. Awesome. Isn't it nice? When there's no rain in the sky. Ian says, hello, everyone. Please chat us up about magic and mystical subjects. Erin says, I'm in the 50s and have sun. That sounds about where we are at. I think it's about in the 50s. Not much warmer than that. Teresa says, hi. Yesterday it was really warm here. Sat outside and called in the elements and reconnected with nature after a long winter. Snow is almost gone. Cool. Carla says, enjoying the sun. Yes, it's very nice to see the sun. I like it. 50s here too, Carla says.
Time for me to get out and mow the lawn, but I gotta rebalance our blade first.
Yep. And we got a blade balancer. It came in the mail. So one of those weird things is like can't seem to find stuff in town where we live. We always have to order it and have it come in the mail. It's kind of annoying.
Yeah, we always try to buy things at the local stores and they never have what we're looking for.
Yep, we always have weird needs apparently. Our needs are not typical for the people who live here. But yeah, things happen. Sort of the way it goes.
Well, it's true. People don't necessarily like buy boxes of capacitors.
Balancers for their
Well, even a spanner, though. I mean,
yeah.
even tools, you know. We got a Harbor Freight here and a couple hardware stores and various other things. I couldn't find a simple spanner that we needed for the car. We had to order that off Amazon. Everything, you know, I don't know. I guess that's what we get from living in a small town where they don't care if they serve the public's needs or not.
Well, they have limited supply, I guess.
Yeah.
They're not worried about the demand. Teresa says, I have to change the oil in my lawnmower and check to make sure the blade is good. Yep. Ickle says, hi there all. Happy Sunday. Hi, Ickle. Welcome. Ickle Pixie.
Well, hey, the car's almost running again, though. You still have to buy a suspension part.
I thought it's coming. There's another one?
No.
Okay.
Just got to put it on when it gets there.
Okay, I thought you said we still had to buy one. No problem. Just a misheard. But yes, we have to wait for it to arrive. And I had my tooth pulled, which was really a surprise. Wasn't expecting them to actually have the time to do it, so the universe was very cooperative. And my mouth is doing okay. My sister is just got out of the ICU in the hospital, so she's doing better. So thank you for everyone who sent her some energy. I sent her some energy last night, and I'll update the room number that she's in after we get done here and get back in the house. But anywho, what do we want to talk about today? Carla says some weird stuff happened overnight here in Pennsylvania. An arsonist set the governor's residence on fire with him and his family in it. They're all okay, but What? Yeah, that's strange. Pickle says, so glad to hear she's out of the hospital. Hope she continues to recover quickly. No, she's not out of the hospital. She's been transferred to another room, but she's
She's out of
not.
ICU.
Yeah, she's out of ICU. So that means that she's improved well enough that they don't have to monitor her 24 hours a day and they can have more regular monitoring. So, but she's still pretty out of it. She might be in the hospital for another couple of days, but I'm glad that I heard from her today and she let me know. So that's good news. Definitely, definitely good news. Because I had some strange dreams just before she called me. Like a couple of days before, my dreams were just so odd and unusual for me. And I was like, why am I having these strange dreams? And then when she called me and I answered the phone Saturday morning, I immediately knew something was wrong. And I just said, what's happened? What's going on? Because it was pretty clear that something had happened. And I guess it's a good uh, example of how it's not necessarily a good idea to put things off because her symptoms began on Wednesday and she just thought she was dehydrated and waited to go to the hospital till Friday. She actually fell twice on Wednesday because her blood pressure got so low. And they said on Friday that if she hadn't come in, she might not have made it. It was by the time she got there, it was a matter of life and death. So yeah, I was really happy that she got there, but I wish she had gone there sooner. Bill says, oh, sorry, I misunderstood. Sentiment remains the same. Yep, thank you. Jen says, hello, everyone. Much love and blessings to you all. Hi, Jen. Teresa says, I'm interested in what your take is on spiritual growing pains and how they might manifest in different people. Well, that's a huge subject because it's really going to depend upon what the person is blocking and not dealing with and what they need to face. Um,
Yeah, that's really the major thing for spiritual growing pains, I'd say, is the stuff that's already inside a person that you need to clear out and things like that. That's shadow work.
yeah, on the process of becoming clear, becoming a more clear individual and recognizing your part in things and recognizing when it's nothing to do with you and that it's other people's parts, separating yourself from the idea of the other being responsible for them or them being responsible for what's going on with you, kind of thing. Learning about projections, both negative and positive projections, are an issue. And I remember, you know, I it was it's fairly easy. It was fairly easy for me to recognize my negative projections, but it was a lot harder for me to deal with my positive projections, where I um, put on someone qualities that they didn't actually have because I don't know, I either saw the best of myself in them or I saw their potential. I'm not sure exactly how it was or how it is exactly what the mechanism, but yeah, learning to accept people for exactly who they are and not who they might be or who they pretend to be, and that is challenging when you see someone and you have an image that you're projecting onto them, whether it's a negative or positive image, then you're blocking your own ability to actually communicate and their ability to communicate who they are and so forth. So communication becomes muddied. It's not clear at that point. And then misunderstandings are much more likely to happen. And of course, with the positive projections, disappointment is huge when they fail to live up to your positive projection and insist on being what they are, whatever that might be. We're all flawed for sure. Beth says, hi everyone. Hi, Beth. Teresa says, love Beth. Yeah, so, being alive is definitely an interesting learning experience for sure. Beth says, Teresa, love, or heart. Um, and I think that's part of spiritual progress is becoming that way. Carla says, and the manifesting of your dental treatment, yeah, that was pretty good. The universe was committed.
Yeah, that was nice. That happened right away.
I was thinking about that this morning. It's like people talk about manifesting and how it happens, and really how it happens is you become your best version in your life and pay attention to what's going on and interact with the universe in a positive way, and the universe responds in kind and helps you out when you need it. It doesn't mean that you're not doing anything on your end. I mean, I had to call, two different dental clinics in order to try and get an appointment to start with, and then fill out some paperwork, and then I was going to have to wait till July, and then I got the second clinic, and I was going to have to wait till May, and then the first clinic called and says, "We had a cancellation this morning. Can you get in?" And then we were off. The fact that everyone in the rest of the morning canceled so that the dentist was available to do this complex extraction. Um, yeah, the staff was commenting on how this happened, and I just said the universe really wanted that tooth gone. It was pretty serious about it. So yay for that. And yeah, it's a combination of real life interaction and psychic interaction, universal kind of positive things that you have coming for you, I think, and that kind of stuff. And Beth says, love back to Teresa. Al says, hello, hi, Al. Carla says, hi, Bethy. And Carla says, right, Chifra? Yeah, it made me think of the story. There's a Chinese story about a town, a village that was having trouble with their weather. And they weren't getting enough rain. Everything was like, their crops weren't growing. And they called in a spiritual man to come and fix the town and see, what could be done. So he came into town, and the first thing he did was move into a small hut outside of town, because the town, he said that the people in the town were so off that there was no way he could do it being that close to them, because they were going to mess up with what he was doing. And the problem was they weren't living right. They weren't being themselves. And so he stayed out of town and sort of got tuned into the right space, and then the rains came. And I thought that was a pretty interesting way of trying to explain that. It's like it happens when you're in the right frame of mind and in the right relationship with the universe. And it's not like an effort, it's not the kind of effort we often think of. It is an effort in the sense that you have to be clear and work on yourself and so forth. But anyway, and Beth says hi, Carla, and hi, Al. So we had our event on Friday night, and we learned a few things about how it works and how some things could be made better in the future. But we really had a blast doing our amethyst crystal charging event. So I'm hoping everybody at home got a chance to do their own, those who are participating in it. And it was just way cool. It was fun and and interesting and entertaining and encouraging and all that stuff all together at the same time. So I was glad we did it. Always good to try new things. So thank you to everybody who was there, and for everyone who participated after the fact. So yay, people. I think everything that happens in our life can be considered a part of spiritual growing pains. We can use it as an opportunity to grow. Carla says, I loved it and I'm still on cloud nine. Good. It's always good to be on cloud nine.
Did you ever wonder about all the other
I was
eight
just
clouds?
wondering if cloud 10 was like, any better. And is cloud 8 like, going downhill? I'm not sure which way the numbers work. Who came up with 9? Teresa says, the Zoom was so helpful. I redid it the next night and was blown away with the power it generated. Carlos says, thank you so much for hosting this. You're welcome. Yes, it was definitely, it was good. Nice to do that. And sometimes that kind of personal interaction is just what's needed. But the whole idea of finding your own path and being your own person is like, the life work, isn't it? Teresa says, I mentally visited all the amethysts over the globe and located some under the oceans too. Well, yeah, I'm sure that there's amethysts under the oceans. They're everywhere. Amethysts are probably a fairly common crystal, I would think. You could always do other webs with other crystals and go crazy, but one at a time. This is the one I picked. Some other groups are doing different crystals, I'm sure. That's the one that came to me, so that's the one I did. Carla says it was a really powerful get together. Yep, we had a good time. So, like again, thank you, Paul, for participating in person. That was great. Oh, when I was at the dentist office, I had some fairies come to entertain me. That was kind of interesting because I was stuck on the chair while they were working on my mouth and was facing the ceiling, obviously. And all of a sudden, I started seeing some little movement going by, and I thought, oh, they came to distract me from what's going on in my mouth. So cool. That's awesome. Jen says, ah, I totally missed it. I should have put it in my calendar. Will you do it again next month? Maybe. I might do it again next month. I have to look at the schedule and see when the moon is. But yeah, I think it's a good opportunity. And we had fun, doing the sacred tree meditation and the healing chant before in order to get into the right mood and calling in the directions or the elements in the beginning to just sort of set the stage for it to get us all in the right same page, frame of mind kind of thing. Carla says, I'm still all for an in-person shindig. Someone here mentioned something about that before. Well, they talked about doing a Siofra fair, Siofra's Magic Alcove fair, but I'm not planning it. Someone else will have to plan it. I'll come. Everyone else can do the work. The healing chant. Yes, that was a good one. And I actually use that on my sister. I modify the healing chant when I'm, in some cases, when I'm doing distance Reiki. And that actually helped me to get more in touch with her yesterday evening when I was doing the Reiki because I was a little tired from all the other stuff that happened and not sleeping that well the night before. And the healing chant helped to really focus my energy and so forth, and use the stuff from the sacred tree meditation with the light, the golden the white light with the golden sparks, and then the earth energy from below, and combining those together to get that happening. Um, and the modification of the words is pretty straightforward. It's like, deep in your bones, the goddess is alive, instead of deep in my bones. You just sort of modify the phrasing of the words to indicate that you're sending it or doing it for someone and trying to get the healing energy for them. I checked in with my sister and she said that she doesn't know if she felt the energy because she's pretty out of it. And I said, that's fine. I just thought I'd ask because I know when I did it, and sometimes people do. But considering the shape she was in, it wasn't much of a surprise. It's like, yeah, okay. But yeah, the healing chant is a good one. I found a version of it. It was online, and then I changed the wording a little bit when we decided to adopt it as a group when we were doing group stuff, and then that became its fixed state as far as like how we did it. So some of the words are different than the original version that I found online. Carla says, nodding head again, like you can see me. And this is true. I can hear you nodding, Carla. And thank you for sending the pictures of what you're doing. So I appreciated that. It's sort of a new vision of what we're doing here, doing it in person. So let's get some more questions going. going over to my son's place because my daughter-in-law has a birthday coming up, and I finished the shawl for her. She gets to get that today, so that'll be fun after the show. Just head over there and give her shawl, have some cake. My daughter makes the cake, and she's a good cake maker. She does a great job. Carla says, thank you, Siofra. You're welcome. Like all the colors everybody has. I'm glad that spring is actually here. How are the shawls coming? Well, I have 2 done, and I'm working on the 3rd one. Gabrielle says, hey everyone. Hi, Gabrielle. Brianna says, do we get to ask questions about anything? I just joined. Yes, as long as it has to do with magic or your spiritual path or, how energy works.
On the subject,
Just not anything in the universe, but it covers a lot. So yes, you can ask questions. That says, last week I had a vision. I could see under feet deep in the earth. I saw amethyst, gold, every stone and metal you can imagine glow. Ooh, that sounds sweet. I like that. Carla says, hi, angel girl. It's always nice when you get a vision of what's inside the planet. I like it. I got to show off my earth ball and my peace ball since I added them to the altar. So gone, Brianna. Ask away. Brianna says, how do I protect myself against spirits and how do I get rid of an intranquil spirit? Okay. Depends on this. A lot of spirits you don't need protection from if they're positive spirits when it comes to that. So generally speaking, people are wanting to protect themselves from negative influences and things that are like impactful in a negative sense. When it comes to human ghosts, for example, there are definitely ways of doing that. And I have a video on ghost proofing your house that you could look at and how to seal your house magically. The main way that you protect yourself from spirits and intranquil spirits of any kind is to have natural authority, to claim your authority, to set your boundaries in order to decide what is and what is not allowed in your space. And that takes practice and experience, and the claiming of that ability. It's not enough to just know intellectually that you should be able to do it. You have to feel it. The spirits will respond to that. You have the authority to tell anything out there to leave you alone and to not bother you if you don't want them around. And if you know that you have that authority, that's actually all you need to do is to state it out loud. I usually like to state these things out loud rather than just in my mind because words have power on their own, and you're making your will known and real by speaking the words aloud. So you can just say to something that's bothering you, go away. If you've got a ghost in your house, like a human being who's not crossed over like they're supposed to and is kind of stuck, that's a different situation. You can tell them to leave you alone and give them a part of the house to stay in until you can find someone to help cross them over, or make an arrangement with them where you're both happy with the arrangement, like they get the attic and you get the rest of the house, or they don't turn the lights on and off when you have guests over, or bother your children in the house or something like that. Don't do things that scare you, that kind of thing. But you have to state the purpose of what it is that you want. If it is, in my paranormal activities that I do, the human spirits are fairly easy for me to deal with because I figure out why they're stuck and then how to help them go to the next place they need to be in, because they're not supposed to be here. That's kind of, this is not where you're supposed to end up after you die, is stuck here. if it comes to like negative spirits, your best defense is being positive and creating a positive environment in your space, taking control of the environment in your space, doing things that make negative spirits not want to be around you. Because although in physical reality it might be true that opposites attract, when it comes to spiritual reality, opposites do not attract. You attract similar things. Uh, the energy sort of meets itself where it's at, kind of thing. And so if you if you're one of those people that does a lot of staging in order to try and get the negative energy out, but then you don't do anything to bring positive energy in, that's how a lot of people get stuck in that kind of a loop where they have to constantly sage, like sometimes once a month, sometimes every couple of weeks, depending on how bad it is, maybe sometimes every day. But what you need to do is to take um, not just control, but own your space and decide what is supposed to be there, and whether that's music that you love or smells that you love or you know whatever it is that lifts your spirits, things that bring in positive energy and fill the space with positivity, that will naturally repel any quote unquote negative spirit beings that might be out there. Brianna says, someone sent them to hurt me. Send them back. Carla says, I was telling the hubs about your globes. They're potent. Thank you. I think the earth ball we've been working on for what, 25 years?
Well, it's been a long time.
It's been a long time since we got that, because we found it at, you said you liked the idea of that and describing what you were looking for. And then we had one of those like 30-mile flea markets that was down the road, and we stopped at one of the spots and they had the globe there, so we picked it up. But yeah, that says it was so huge and beautiful, I have no words for its beauty and power. The amethyst, yes, and the vision under the ground. Gabrielle says, I didn't sleep well. The full moon, Kundalini, and the fairies dancing kept me awake. Yeah, I've been having trouble with the sleeping with the full moon and stuff. Shay says, it was really great to see some of the altars during the full moon Zoom. Gabrielle says, so I took a nap. Well, good for you. Take care of yourself. Jay says that Beth, what a great vision. Beth says, Gabriella, I never sleep well on a full moon. Beth says, Shay, love. Al says, in tranquil spirit is a dark love spell kind of thing, right? A hoodoo spell, I think.
Sounds like it, but
yeah, I've not heard of it before, but if someone has sent you a spirit to hurt you, what you do is you send them back to who sent them to you. You know who it is, you can say them by name, And I had that happen to me spontaneously once when I was up in Toronto before, I knew that I knew all this stuff. And I don't know why someone sent this spirit being to harass me. It just suddenly showed up, and it was like sort of a demonic-ish kind of looking face and whatnot. And I'm like, what the heck? And I was in Chinatown in Toronto, and I saw a figurine there that reminded me of it. So it was probably more like a feline or dragon face or something like that, because it was like a little statue that they had that I thought this is the image that this person used. So I used that to focus on sending it to whoever sent it to me, even though I didn't know who it was. And I got an immediate, like, uh-oh, kind of response from whoever sent it, and then it was gone, and it didn't bother me again. So the natural authority I was talking about, you have the right. No one can make you have to put up with this kind of stuff. You don't have to allow it to happen, and you can just send it back and say no. It's a process. It doesn't happen immediately for a lot of people. I'm unusual that way. I learned about that when I was a kid, and ever since then it's like, yeah, I'm sorry, you got nothing on me. There's no way you can do that. And they're like, oh, you're right, I'm sorry. I didn't realize who I was dealing with. So yeah, you do that, send it back, and then ward your place. Put up do a circle around your property. You can put stones in the ground outside, or if you live in an apartment, you can put stones in the outside in the corners of your space along the walls. You can put up mirrors facing outward, so that, and with the idea that when you put the mirrors, anything someone sends you is going to reflect back to them. You start to do some psychic self-defense, and you learn how to accomplish that. I think that's going to be one of my next video classes, is going to be on psychic self-defense, because the subject comes up a lot, and it's like it's not okay for people to be harassed, but you have control over your end of it, is what I'm saying. You can't not necessarily control what they're trying to do, but you can control whether you're willing to accept them doing it. Kind of like any kind of abusive relationship, and you have to take a stand. It's the only way to make it stop. So hopefully that helps. And you can look in the on the channel. There are playlists, and you can look under psychic self-defense, and there's a whole bunch of different videos that I've done on different aspects of this. And the one I most recently did was the anatomy of a psychic attack. I recommend watching that, so then you can figure out what your own brain might be doing to short circuit your ability to defend yourself, because we are part of the whole equation, I guess, would be the right word for that. So yes, and I'm sorry that that's happening to you. It's just no fun at all. Gabrielle says, Beth, I wish I had a nice yard and the energy to play outside and enjoy the pink moon. The fairies are so funny. Beth says the ones that were, oops, I missed it. There we are. The ones that were never human for me took me screaming, get the hell out. Well, yeah, sometimes you have to. Jen says, is there a way to develop mental telepathy, or is it a gift that you either have or don't have? You can develop it. I think everyone has a certain amount of natural telepathy. Some people are just more aware of it than others. But communication, like, if you ever had anybody suddenly out of the blue contact you that you were thinking about, and you hadn't seen them in years, or you go shopping and all of a sudden an old friend, that you haven't seen in years, or suddenly shows up in the store and you were just thinking about them last week, or what have you. Yeah, those kinds of things are pretty good indications that energy moves between people, and telepathy, thought forms is part of telepathy, and how telepathy works is sending out thoughts and other people receiving them. So you can certainly do that. Beth says, Gabrielle, I love my garden, and barefoot outside is where the vision came. That'd be a good place to have that vision in particular. Brianna says, how do you do that? Well, hopefully I've given you some information since you asked that question, and I continued to talk before I saw it, but let me know. And there's lots of videos on the channel on how you can do it specifically. There's just so many different methods for self-defense and setting your boundaries and creating a positive environment, and depending on the path that you're chosen. Carlos says, we're going for a drive back the hollows this evening to watch the deer. Hopefully that'll help me sleep tonight. Full moon fever for sure. Al says, do you have any experience with Egyptian prophecy stone? No, not particularly, although I have at least 2 lifetimes in Egypt that I remember. I don't remember a prophecy stone in particular. I haven't worked with one now. Teresa says, on the spiritual level, what is the difference between a snake and a serpent? Are there positive and negative versions of both? I don't think anyone's ever asked that question. I've never thought about it. I think a snake and a serpent are the same thing, but we probably think of a serpent as more insidious because of the stories about Adam and Eve and the serpent. And then the assumptions that serpents are evil. But in a lot of cultures, serpents and snakes are, about wisdom and the goddess and so forth. So that's going to be an internal dialogue.
Speaking right.
Yes. And, and there's lots of cultures where they have, I think serpents are generally bigger than snakes, maybe. Serpents are like the world serpent would be, in the end of the world with Ragnarok, when the serpent awakens, would be large and huge. So it could be a size difference. But yeah, I'm imagining that is not an answer that can be determined, because it's probably more of an internal definition of things than a truth. You know what I mean? It's not like a factual thing.
Yeah, magically, I don't think they distinguish really.
Yeah, I don't either. Gabrielle says, I have DTs, fairies, angels in my place, and occasionally a rude human spirit. I find inner work keeps my place peaceful. But the energy shifts from the Kundalini purge can bring different energies. Shay says, psychic self-defense, great idea for a class, yay, and thanks for the reminder about your existing videos that apply. Gabrielle says, most of my issues are probably my own thought forms. Oh, most of us, it's the case, until we clear them out, and then we can start to see things differently. Pickle Pixie says, any advice for connecting to trees? I keep trying to connect to a couple near me, but so far I'm getting the sense that I'm too busy. Anything I can practice to slow down, sit under the tree, and meditate? That's what I would do. Lay on the ground beneath the tree.
Try to feel about the tree. Don't try not to make it about thought and thinking, but about feeling and perception.
Right. Try to become the tree.
Yeah, inner perception.
And if you put your back against the tree and close your eyes and think about the roots of the tree and follow those roots down into the ground, then you'll connect to the spirit of the tree. You know, think about the sap flowing up right now, especially with spring coming. Sap is moving a lot in almost all of the trees, and going up and reaching out for the sun to get the nutrients that it needs. And the fact that we're a symbiotic relationship, because the tree creates oxygen that we use, and we create carbon dioxide that it uses. And so you get yourself in that frame where you're part of a symbiotic relationship with something in nature, and relax, sort of open your mind up to the subtle energy that the trees are. And that can help a lot. You can take a nap under a tree too. See what kind of dreams you get, if it's safe to be outside under a tree. Gabrielle says, so I try to focus on cleaning up my own energy. I would make the fairies a garden and a fairy's house. I love making them stuff. Carla says, oh, I do, Al. I love them. Very protective and grounding. Good for connecting to higher realms. Beth says, I'm back. I have stuffed peppers in the oven. You're always joining us at dinner time, aren't you? How are your cats? Are they hungry yet? Gabrielle says, I like Eckhart's explanation on clearing up thought forms and the pain body, but I feel bad when I'm unconscious. But I also have moments of transcendence too. I want to be peaceful like Eckhart.
Well, it's a process. You can get there. Just keep following his recommendations. Yeah. It takes work, and it's not an easy thing for a lot of people to accomplish. But if you focus on the things he recommends, and also you might look at Sri Ramana Maharshi's stuff for an Indian take on the same thing, but basically they're talking about achieving the same state.
So Beth says, yum, or Teresa says, yum, Beth, healthy. Oki Vision says, peace and blessings. What kind of music are you currently enjoying, or a music artist that brings you peace and harmony? Thank you for being a source of wisdom, knowledge, and positive energy. But you're the one who's listening most to music for your meditations.
I listen to a lot of stuff, but interesting questions. I'm going to name a few here. I've got a list I've particularly put together that I listen to myself that has a bunch of mystical and magical songs on it. So there's a bunch of good things. Since I listen to classic rock, that's what you're going to get. There's like Steve Miller Band, Through the Window, talks about making a better world. Concrete Blonde, Heal It Up, for example. There's a whole lot of positive songs out there. I'm not likely to think of all of them at the moment. There's a couple about the Kundalini. There's Styx does one called The Serpent is Rising from an old album. There's a group called Love and Rockets that did an album called Kundalini Express, and that's the name of a song too about the Kundalini. So there's lots of stuff out there, but mostly for me, I don't have one that brings me peace and harmony, but I listen to a lot of stuff. But a lot of people may not realize, if they like old classic rock, that even some of the earlier stuff, like the early America, and it actually seems to be, it's all very positive music, and it actually seems to be recorded really well for music of that time period, at least the copy I have, and I don't think the copy I have is any special. I think it's just a regular recording. So America has some nice stuff. If you want some little more interesting spiritual music, spiritual advancement, mystical stuff like that, Kansas has a lot. And let's not forget songs like John Lennon's Mind Games, where he talks about magicians and druids and piercing the veil and playing those mind games forever, which is all about magic. And in fact, he says in there, some call it magic, the search for the grail. So yeah, there's a bunch of them, but no one. But I collect them all and get all the nice songs from all different artists on the subject. Some nice Beatles songs. Some that I include just because they're great, like While My Guitar Gently Weeps. It has the right feel, so it's not really about mysticism.
So Echo says, feeling instead of thinking. That tracks. That's an issue I've been working on. I'll ask hubby to stand guard and try a nap. Thanks. You're welcome. Al says, cool. Carla, I just got a few today.
Yes, Fly Like an Eagle. Speaking of Steve Miller. Electric Avenue, I think that's a Electric Avenue. I think that's actually Alan Parsons. He has some good stuff, but I don't have any of his stuff on my special list of magical songs.
Well, that's Fly Like an Eagle, Rise Up, Electric Avenue. Brianna says, how do you program crystals to put up a shield and keep up a shield? I can't seem to make it work, and thank you for answering my question. For one thing, if you're going to use a crystal to do it, you have to visualize it in the beginning, probably on a daily basis, in order to like settle it. But also, you program it to continue to get stronger and stronger instead of allowing it to get dissipated. So when you first put the crystal there and you tell it what it is you want it to do, and you give it your energy to start with, then attach it to a different energy source, whether it is the earth or the moon or the sun or whatever, or some etheric energy that you're working with. You give it a source of energy that it can then use to continue to get stronger and stronger, and then each time you do it, the charge will last longer and longer and get stronger and stronger. If you're going to use a crystal for that kind of thing, do not cleanse them. Do not take them down. Do not make them, better by washing them and stuff like that, because then you're starting from scratch again. You want to have an energy shield using crystals. You want them to stay charged and to get stronger and not have to start from scratch every month, which I think is a common mistake right now that new witches are making, because there's all this stuff out there about having to cleanse your crystals and recharge your crystals
Yeah, I
every month
agree.
and
It's
so
much
forth.
more powerful if you don't have to, and you can let that charge increase and build
Yeah.
up over time. Yeah.
If you have a stone that is trying to collect and get rid of negative energy, you give it a grounding cord so that, and tell it that it can take all the negative energy from your environment and then ground it out into the ground, and it dissipates and goes away, and it doesn't have to be cleansed because it's cleansing itself automatically. It's just sort of going by rote. And so you think through the problem, think through what the issue is and why it isn't staying. Since I don't know you well enough to be able to tell just randomly off the top of my head, these are just some ideas. And certainly you don't have to follow any of them if they don't work for you. But yeah, you can do like the wards, the putting up the shields and so forth. You can attach that to the idea of the lunar cycle, but always on the increase, like recharge it on the full moon, not recharge it, but charge it up more and reactivate it and like remember it, because this is all in your head partially. It's like you're creating a universe in your own mind where these things are functioning a certain way. And so your imagination is really important to it functioning the way you want it to. You have to really think about what works for you, and if there's an issue, think about why that particular thing isn't going to work for you. You have to believe that it's real for it to work too. But it's not just that. It's that magic is a way of developing a method of communication with the universe, and each person has their own language that they use to communicate with the universe. And the universe doesn't care what language you use. Not talking, speaking language, but imagination, visualization, attitudes, assumptions about the reality and how it works. The universe doesn't judge us for any of that. It'll adapt to wherever we are. And if we change, that's fine too. It'll adapt to that. It just takes time for the effects to be felt. And so find something that you feel is going to work and stick with it, and try not to do too many things at once. Stick with one thing. And that's one of the reasons why we've got the sacred tree meditation that helps to cleanse your own aura and helps you ground and learn how to shield your own energy and take charge of your own energy. With the healing chant, which helps to clear out your own body and to bring wellness to you and so forth. And that by itself can help a lot because it connects you both to the earth and to universal life force energy that's just there without judging what it is. So, that's why we meditate. That's why we do a lot of that kind of stuff and pay attention to that kind of thing. And yeah, it's a process for sure. And we're all human and we don't do it all perfectly all the time. There's no doubt about it. But yeah, you can. When I started learning how to do the evoking pentagrams, I did it every night for a while when I went to bed, because I was learning about how they worked and why they worked that way and what was the mechanism behind it, and becoming acquainted with it as a symbolist system that would make sense to me. And then by doing it, I learned something about it and why it was done that way, and there was actually a reason. I think that's it. It's like most of the time there's a reason behind why we do things the way we do. But a lot of times people don't look to find out what it is. If you know the reason, it makes more sense. It helps. So, you practice it, you do it regularly, you really get it down, and then you don't have to do it as often, and then you do it periodically, and, it's like, and they stay if you want them to. That's the thing. So, hopefully that helps. There's lots of fun stuff ahead. That says Teresa is one of the oldest recipes. No cheese, lightly seasoned. Gabrielle says the ego is so tricky, like when people think they are more egoless than everyone else. I know, isn't that funny? Yeah, I'm so great. I have no ego. Look at me. Ta-da! Egoless. Yes, right. Okay. Whatever you say. Alice says, Dead Ma 5. Right this second, that's a song that raises energy. Then blast it off. I'm getting chills right now thinking about it. Carlos says Zeppelin.
Yeah, Zeppelin's got some good ones too. I like the Rain song, of course. Stairway to Heaven. If you want something that has a very mystical sound to it, though I'm not sure they exactly meant it that way when they wrote it. But yeah, then Achilles' Last Stand, which isn't so mystical, but has a great guitar part in it.
Music is great stuff.
Yep.
And Beth says, classic rock is powerful for me. Jen says, I saw a video about people who can hear telepathically that they were able to communicate the thoughts of non-verbal autistic people. Cool. I imagine that somebody who is very sensitive could actually do that. So that's awesome. Teresa says, Carla, cool. I'd like to hear a tree take a drink. Jen says, my son is nonverbal autistic, so I'm very interested in learning how to be able to receive his thoughts. Do you have any suggestions on how I could practice hearing his thoughts? Oh, well, try not to think of them as separate things, but sort of as like a, I hear people's thoughts mostly as their feelings. So as an empath, I know what people are thinking by how they're feeling, and I automatically translate the feelings I'm getting them into words in my head. Sometimes they're exact words, sometimes they're not. So you might want to try that and just, try to be as present as you can, see what happens. Jen says, I love classic rock too. I have my son's birthday cake in the oven. Ooh, cool. Lots of birthdays. Alice says, Ian, your song choices brings back memories of jam nights when I played bass.
Yeah, end up listening to a lot of music. Usually like a couple hours a day at least when I just sit down and listen to it. Not always, I don't have to, but I really miss it when I don't.
Gabrielle says, that sounds delish, Beth, stuffed peppers. Beth says, it is. Oki says, thank you for answering my question and pronouncing my name perfectly. I did. Okay. I've been having a strong inclination to wanting a black cat. What is the significance of wanting a black cat as a familiar? Because black cats are beautiful and other people hate them. And why is that? That's so silly. And someone needs to take care of them. Why not us? Protect them on Samhain so that stupid people don't run around and hurt and torture these poor creatures. I love black cats. I've had any number of black cats
Yeah,
through my life.
we've always had black cats before our current cat, who's a ginger.
Right. And then the brindle we had, which was like a rescue kind of a thing. And then Jasmine, who was
She was like a Siamese.
she was a type of
Offshoot or
Siamese.
something.
Yeah. But yeah, cats are wonderful. I like cats. And I think black cats are great. Brianna says, that's great information. I haven't found that information anywhere else. Well, I'm glad that you asked the question. Carla says, it was pretty neat, Teresa, but to this day, I'm unsure of what that was. Hoping maybe Siofra, Ian, or someone here has had that happen or knows it. I've heard once a connection, it's made forever. Once a connection is made, it's forever. I think is what she meant.
Well, yeah, it can be. I don't know. I've made connections to trees and things, but I've never got a sound like that from them. But then I've gotten all sorts of indicative sounds and things. Yeah, I really don't have much to add to that. When they communicated to me, trees has always been through feelings and imagery rather than a sound like that. But there's no reason not. I suspect it's just a difference in your sensitivity. You're probably more sensitive to clairaudience and audio stuff for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like when I had that guy in my office who tried to like put a spirit in me, and I kept telling him, no, you can't use that part of my energy field, like back off. And then the third time he tried and I, said no, I clearly heard him say, I'm not used to people resisting me. That was like definite words, but it was also the feeling, I'm sure. So, yeah, I think our abilities
Yeah. Well,
grow as we become more familiar with them and break down the mental barriers that we have to allowing it to happen. Because, people who hear voices are crazy, right?
well, and the
And
thing
there's a
is,
concern.
when things communicate with you like that, the trees and plants and things, it's been my experience. I've been communicated to a couple of times, a few times, not a lot, and I can't necessarily make it happen at will, but it comes from beyond. It's not really in sight or sound or hearing, but it comes through your body and gets interpreted that way when you're talking a communication from something like a being that can't speak, like an actual tree. If you're talking to spirit beings, they can come through basically with words. But in the case of a tree or something like that, it comes through to you when you become able to sense it. And sometimes it's visual, sometimes it's words, and it all depends on which aspects you have. Sometimes it's feelings. Barton goes into this in his books on the clairvoyant aspects. There's all kinds of different ways they can manifest, and it's going to manifest mostly, through whatever aspect of clairvoyance or clairaudience or whatever you're most sensitive in. If you receive their communication, that's how it'll come through. So generally, it's based on the persons themselves. The tree communicates or whatever, but then it gets interpreted by the person, and hopefully you can avoid putting your own preconceived ideas on it. I say that because I once, this is a tiny bit off the subject, but I read a book by a woman who was really in contact with and communicating with a spirit. I was convinced that this was genuine, but she was so Christianized, that she had to stuff everything that came in into her Christian framework. And so, in my opinion, while it was interesting and the being was really clearly communicating with her, it seemed like the being's communications were getting lost in all of her Christian reinterpretations of everything. So, having an open mind, because, when these beings communicate with you, unless you're talking to Jesus, they're not necessarily Christian or anything. The religious stuff is a human conception, unless you're talking to a dead human spirit or something.
And they have their own religion.
Yeah.
Yeah, which could be almost anything.
So yes, you have to let yourself interpret it, and then try to interpret it as openly without putting your own box around what it is. Sorry. Anyways, it's a hard thing to talk about because it's easier to experience it. It's kind of just hard to describe how things can talk to you, like
that have no
stones
voices.
And things.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like there's an archetype energy available there that somehow is, like an oversoul for everything. Whatever terms you want to use.
Yeah, oversoul, diva,
Yeah.
spirit thing. So Oki says, are there any dangerous crystals we should handle differently than others? Just ones that work with you or don't work with you. I mean, not everyone can work with every crystal that's out there.
Or that consist of poisonous substances.
Well, right. You certainly don't want to be playing around with cinnabar, for example, since it's mercury.
Even though that's not immediately like poisonous, like.
Well, they don't recommend
yeah.
you handle
No,
cinnabar with
yes.
your bare hands because you will get mercury leached into your
Yes, but
bloodstream.
you can get arsenic crystals and things.
Yeah,
too,
you can get.
So, yeah.
I think sulfur
no.
crystals are pretty safe because they're actually pretty hard.
Oh yeah, they don't. Yeah.
I have one which is nice, pretty blue, yellow. It's quite amazed. It's a very pretty stone. I mean, and certainly some crystals are more fragile than others, so you have to be careful how you handle them.
But generally no.
Yeah.
The only thing is that some people seem to be sensitive to certain crystals and things, and they can't use them. But that's almost like having an allergy or a food allergy or something.
That's like a personal energetic.
Yeah, there are specific cases of people who can't use specific things, but there's nothing general that I know of. It's all just based on whatever person's balances and imbalances are and sensitivities in their bodies and astral bodies and things like that.
Realm Caster says, Siofra, I've been trying to do magic for 2022. I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. I've read every book. Reading books doesn't actually help you do magic. It gives you ideas on what other people have done that they call magic, but practice is the only thing.
Yeah, really. One thing to keep in mind is all the abilities and things can be built up. You can grow to get the abilities. So repetition and practice is the best way, and especially at first, don't spread your repetition and practice among too many different things. You might try focusing more on one thing till you really get it down and know it, that type of thing, and think about what you're going to specialize in. For a beginner, it's tough because there's so much stuff out there. Where do you start,
Exactly.
Yeah, and there are so many legitimate paths. I mean, there are hundreds and thousands, if not millions, of legitimate paths out there, and they're all a little different depending on the personality of the person. So try to find one that suits you, that isn't a big ordeal, and then, practice it till you gain the abilities needed to do it.
And also, a lot of times people have a misunderstanding of how magic is actually going to manifest itself. It's not like the movies. It can be pretty spectacular, and I've had some singular events that have happened to me that have been almost beyond belief, but those are fairly rare. In general, magic is the practice of connecting to the universe and the energy of the universe and the environment around you and all of the things that exist, not just within you, but outside of you as well, and recognizing that we're not alone in the universe, that there are other forms of intelligence that are out there, and making those energetic connections and starting to feel the movement of the energy. One of the definitions of magic I use is the ability to be able to tell when the energy of the universe is going with you or going against you. It's sort of like reading the tides. It's like there's always shifts in magical energy in everyone's life. We have different cycles that we're going through, different ages, different experience levels, and so forth. And so it's like getting to the point where you're paying attention to the energy and its movement and what's happening with it and what's the best thing to work on at where you're at. And like Ian said, finding one thing, not having too many things, because there are so many different views of how to do the magic.
Well, and once you do it, repetition counts, because not only is that the way you learn things and in your body, and your body gets accustomed to the energies and things over time, and just by repetition, you can accomplish a lot of things magically. Of course, you don't want to have to do it like a lot of them do in like India and stuff, the sadhus, where you have to pronounce something 100 million times to get it to work. But there are faster ways of doing it, but repetition is very important.
Yeah, and what you're doing is you're creating these grooves in your energy field.
So you use the same thing and method over and over again, and that's the best way. It's I would almost say consistency is the best thing, rather than what method you're trying to use to get there, what guru you're studying under, or anything like that. The real trick to success is continuing to focus on that, not spreading it too far, but continuing to work on that till you got that one thing down, and then you build on that to go on, of course.
Yeah. And what you find really fascinating and interesting now can change, through your development. Carla says, HBD to the kiddo, Jen. Brianna says, shielding and taking charge of my own energy is proving to be difficult. Laugh out loud. I keep trying, but it's still not working. I guess practice makes perfect. And yes, it does help. Thank you. Good. And yes, practice does make perfect.
And something else I've been thinking about putting in a video they haven't, that has a bearing on this subject. What you're trying to learn and how easy it is for you is going to depend on the elemental balance you have in your system. If you're trying to learn, say, visual clairvoyance through looking through a magic mirror to see images, you're going to need a good control of the fire element. Not necessarily a lot of the fire element, but control over it to keep your mind from wandering. And that's where you get visual aspects. And the amount of air that you have in your system can determine whether you're clairvoyant hearing or not, clairaudience, whether that functions. So you also may consider what element the specific thing you're trying to accomplish is associated with, and whether you're weak in that element. If you have a difficulty with it, they're analogous. So watery things are like relaxation, meditation. The negative aspects, of course, would be lounging around and doing nothing. The positive aspects would be like concentration and meditation and things like that. So if you're too fiery, your thoughts may wander. You'll have trouble stopping your thoughts. They'll keep going when you try to make it stop. You can't sit still. You have motion problems. This is still my issue. I've been working on excess fire for years and years and trying to bring the water in. It's a big, complicated subject. I'll not draw that out any farther. But yeah, you might consider that, because a lot of times what causes you difficulty is just that you're not in harmony with whatever element might be associated with what you're trying to accomplish.
So Gabrielle says, if I feel a heavy tie to the earth when I'm laying down, I feel a pulling sensation from my lower back. Is that my root chakra connected with the earth? It feels Kundalini related, and I can feel the movement. Maybe it's the fairies dancing around my room at night. No, that sounds like that to me, connecting to the earth energy directly. And it can, for me, that's often where it starts. It's like I can feel it in my sacrum and my tailbone and stuff. And if I relax and don't fight it, then I'll get like a tingling sensation in that area. And then it'll start rising up my spine. So, and says, thank you, Siofra. He is mostly happy. Oops.
I know he gets frustrated when I can't understand.
Well, I'm trying to find it again.
Yeah,
I went too far. Everybody has been talking for a while, apparently. Here we are. He's mostly happy, but I know he gets frustrated when I can't understand what he wants. I use tarot sometimes to try to discern how he's feeling and doing. Gabriella says ginger kitties are pretty hilarious. They have such an interesting voice. They are very talkative. I was surprised. Carla says, firm believer here that music is the answer. Classic rock girl here too. I like some newer artists too, but there will be nothing like the 90s, 1960s to 80s music. Teresa says, I hear trees verbally talking to me. I once got confirmation that this was not just my imagination. Good. Carla says, I can't see in my mind's eye, so that might take a little more sense.
Yeah.
Gabrielle says, ugh, I remember that story about that guy. So creepy. Yeah, he was that guy in my office. Carla says, I felt it. Ickle says, have you listened to the podcast, the telepathy tapes, Jen? If not, you should. It's all about the subject of communication with nonverbal autistics. All right. Brianna says, how do you connect the stone to another energy source permanently so it keeps the shield up and gets stronger? Sorry, I'm made of questions, and I will absolutely check out videos on your channel.
Questions are good, and that's the good part of why we're here, so please don't apologize for that.
Well, picking a stone that's already connected automatically to an energy source can help. Like if you're wanting to use like the moon, you probably wouldn't use like a solar stone in order to do it.
Yeah, moonstone or quartz crystal in that
Right.
instance, you know. For Mars, you might pick something red.
Like
You
ruby.
might pick a ruby. I think ruby is
Ruby matrix is pretty common.
Yeah.
For that. So you get acquainted with the different, like there's the planetary energies that are out there, and then there's
Elemental energy.
the elemental energies. So you got earth, air, fire, water, and you can attach the stone to any of those.
There's also the zodiacal energies. So there you've got the birthstones and possibly metals associated with them that Barton makes mention to, but I'm not familiar with the metals associated with the zodiacal
Yeah, that's not a
sign.
system I particularly work with, so not.
No, I don't either, but you can certainly choose it as a system. So basically, you're doing two things with something like that. The one is an energy source. So you connect it to that energy source, and then the other aspect is putting your intention on top of that to make it do what you want, of course.
Yeah, so you could do a thing like with the elements. You could have a different stone for each element, earth, air, fire, water, and put that around your house or around your space. And each stone would be connected to the element and it would feed off of that element. So a fire stone, something red in general.
Yeah, if you're going to do it based on the elements, do all four elements, and if you want for a shield around a place like around a house, I'd put one at the four corners, not necessarily the actual corners, but I think I'd put them at the cardinal directions, east, south, north, and west.
Yeah, you make sure that your associations, I mean, everyone has different associations, which element belongs in which direction. The element is more important than your association with the direction, but you should match what they are in your head. Like for me, east is air, south is fire, west is water, and north is earth. Other people have different associations for that, but you pick something for each direction. Learn the process of what that element is about and the energy of that element and how it works and so forth, which can help you connect to it, which will help your object connect to the energy source. You can also do the planetary stuff. You can do just the planet. You can just use the earth to charge up each one as a shield. Earth is a great shielding all by itself. You could do just all earth stuff and not worry about anything else. And since you're standing on a planet, it's pretty easy to know where the energy is coming from. So you could, have, you could set up two cords in that case if you're using the earth for the energy. You could have one cord that's pulling it up from the earth and charging the object, and the other cord that's releasing any negative energy that has collected from doing its job. So you could create this kind of a flow and just visualize that happening and just do that over and over and over again, and that'll work. There might be a simpler way just for a shield to just do earth stuff. I don't know. There's so many different things you can do. It's like an endless supply. This strap keeps falling off my shoulder, even though no one can see it. It's bugging me. There we go. All right. So Carla says, nodding head like you can see me again. Professor Hanham says hi. Hi, Professor. Carla says, thank you, Ian. Oki says, when you get to a high level of spiritual mastery, do you stop having nightmares, heart racing dreams? I recently fell asleep with a horror movie on, and I believe it invaded my dream. Movie name, The Disappointment Room, based on a true story.
I don't know, but I,
Certainly.
I wouldn't consider myself have reached a high level of mastery, but I have reached a level where if I'm having a real horror dream, I can usually wake myself up. And also, I learned, and I can't explain how I learned to do this. I learned to throw pentagrams in my dreams. If I get attacked by something psychically or something in a dream or like an astral thing or something, I'll whip out a pentagram and throw it like a ninja throwing star.
Which I thought was
I,
great.
I learned how to do that in my dream. You know,
So I started doing it
I
too.
can't really have lucid dreams at will, but when something like that happens, it will wake me up enough to take control and do something like that.
So Realmcaster says, Siofra, thank you. You're welcome. Teresa says, please elaborate on grooves in your energy field. Okay, remember the story about the statue of the saint, the dog saint in France? We mentioned it a few times on our channel. And over the centuries, a person very lightly touching the stone eventually made a groove into the stone so that it became like this really deep groove. And that is an example. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it will makes an impression. So it like creates a channel of energy in your mind that you can follow.
Yeah,
So when you
and
need it, it's there.
it works like a groove in the sense of like, you know how if you're trying to drive in a rut down the road, it's hard to get out of the rut and not drive in the rut. It's the same kind of thing. When you've done something enough, it just gets easier and easier. And if you've done it, you can actually do it enough that the energy will become automatic and just automatically be released when you make the movements and things, the gestures, whatever they are. This is one of the main advantages of ceremonial ritual. Um, so it's almost as if you're just following a groove. When you first start out doing something like the banishing ritual of pentagram or any kind of ritual, you're going to have to put all your force and all your effort and all your energy into doing it. But if you've done it over and over and over and over again, it builds up that charge in the akasha, so all that energy is there without you having to use all your will and effort to do it. It eventually becomes as simple as just making the movements, and all the energy comes up that way as if you put all your will and force to it. So that's the difference between practicing something a lot and a little bit. It makes an actual magical battery, so to speak. It seems more like a groove, and I mention that because that's what it's like once you've done it and then you do it again after you haven't done it for a while. It's like, oh yeah, this is easier already. You know, you can feel the difference. So it's like a groove in that sense, but really it's like charging up your energy and movements and everything go in the akasha. So yeah,
Yeah,
so
and
it
like
works automatically.
in the very beginning when you're first starting out, you're trying to learn all these different aspects. You're learning like the associations, you're learning like the movements, you're learning about why it's there and so forth. So your mind is filled with a lot of questions and a lot of focus and concentration on various subjects. As you understand and learn those things, you don't need to put that energy into that anymore. So then you have more available energy for the other thing. Okay, so Brianna says that makes sense. Beth says Okie Zion, definitely no horror flicks at bedtime. Pick something you've seen multiple times and drift off. Gabrielle says, yeah, I'm parked in shadow work and meditation and self protection, not very fun, but being present and mindful is my favorite practice. That's why I like Eckhart. The simplicity is attractive for a beginner.
Not only that, but don't dismiss Eckhart because his practices are simple because they can lead to the highest state of enlightenment and peace as he shows forth. You know, when you learn about him, he shows forth that peace, and he always, when he gives his lectures to audience and things, he always stops and takes a minute and reaches contact with that consciousness. So that stuff is very important, and doing it magically is just a different way of doing the same kinds of things if you understand it. Like I say, the magical approach and the mystical approach gets that repetition in there, and Eckhart's more about achieving those states of mind and consciousness just through work, which is absolutely fine. And I don't know uh, of those who know, but Eckhart Tolle's stuff has found a good home along with some actual movie stars trying for enlightenment, such as Jim Carrey gets a lot out of his stuff. Jim Carrey has actually made some real progress using Eckhart Tolle's stuff that he talks about in some interviews and things. So it can be very effective. And you don't gain magical powers, so to speak, through Eckhart's methods, but to gain that peace and that consciousness he has, that's priceless, and that's the goal of enlightenment for many. Most of the people who want enlightenment would love to have that kind of peace and harmony that he lives in now.
So, Oki says, "What's the best way to cleanse a hotel room?" Ha ha! It's not easy.
Sulfuric acid, burn it all.
Yeah, burn the whole thing down. Spray it with that stuff, luminol, and then look at it and then leave as you scream in terror.
Sulfuric acid will just burn everything up. Don't worry about it. Burn all the stuff off. Yeah. Sorry. Oh, that was very nice.
Thank you,
Teresa.
Yeah, when I go to a hotel room, it is really hard when you're an empath and you can see thought forms and feel everything. And so having your safety net as far as your own personal boundaries are concerned is vitally important. I don't like laying on a bed that who knows what's happened in the room. I used to have nightmares in hotel rooms, people fighting that I could hear and whatnot. It was driving me crazy. So I charged up a piece of labradorite and traveled with that to create like a circle space around our hotel room so that I could sleep safely. And yeah, it isn't easy. It's a challenge. It's one of the most challenging environments because you don't know who's been there, you don't know who's coming after, you don't know what's going on, what happened, and stuff like that. And if you're really sensitive, if you can read objects and you lay on a bed, think about the possibilities. Yeah. So, yeah, it's not easy. I don't recommend it anyway. And Gabrielle says, the mystic path feels very comfortable to me. And Beth says, Gabrielle, keeping it simple, not stressing over the process and feel. Oki says, how do you find out what elements you have in your system? Can you find that in your natal chart? No.
Not
you
really.
cannot find it in your natal chart.
The best recommendation I have is in the first is covers like the first and second chapter of Barden's first book, Initiation into Hermetics. And what you do is you discover, he goes through three processes. So you discover what your elements are for your physical body, your astral body, and your mental body. But basically what it consists of, in his case, is writing down, you take what he uses the term astral mirrors, but they're mirrors of your personality, not magical mirrors. But so what you do is you map out all your good characteristics and all your bad characteristics, and then you, using the guidelines he gives in the book, as far as judging by the elements, you separate them out into how many of your good and bad characteristics are associated with which elements. And usually you'll find a preponderance of them in one element or the other element. And then you use that. And to start out, he uses three ways of balancing them basically. For the astral ones, your character, he gives methods of changing your character flaws like auto-suggestion and a bunch of other things. So you start out by rearranging. You fix your bad character flaws and change them into good ones. And anyway, you
foundation of shadow work.
Yeah, the shadow work. So you redistribute your elements that way to balance them. And then he starts with mental exercises to balance your elements. So he starts at like, for example, watching your thoughts for air, holding on to a single thought or idea for a certain amount of time. That corresponds to the fire aspect. So the same thing, you map out your characteristics, and basically you learn what the elemental aspects are. Earth is heavy and down, but it's also respect and punctuality, but it can also relate to getting bogged down in earth, too heavy. So there's positive and negative aspects, and by that you can judge your elemental balance, and then you start working with the elements, and then you begin to perceive your elemental balance directly.
Yeah, and the ideal, of course, is to become as balanced in all the elements equally.
Yeah, because that's where you find true power when you start getting a balance, where you start getting a contact with the Akasha element, which will happen naturally from balancing the elements. Then you're really starting to get somewhere. As you'll start getting magical power and abilities, will start coming naturally.
So Beth says, "Okay, I travel often with my daughter. I carry a bag of sage, salt, crystals, and a small singing bowl." Yeah, and actually, I bring crystals with me, not just the labradorite, when I go to hotel rooms. And we usually travel with our staffs, and our staffs sort of kind of guard the door, as it were, and announce to any spirit energies that happen to be in the area who we are and that we deserve their respect and they need to leave us alone. So that's one of the things that's helpful. So Gabrielle says, "Thanks for answering. Yeah, it feels like the Kundalini is just dancing around throughout my body, and I can see the fairies synchronizing and dancing around." Violet says, "Hey, hi guys. I had to get on here to say hi. I've been very sidetracked with my star lore. My apology for being late." Hi, Violet. Gabrielle says, "It's quite amazing to host this kind of energy. I can't believe this is my life now." And thanks, Beth. Yeah, I think having a good practice of presence that Eckhart talks about has helped my anxiety levels. I just got stick with it and not be hard on myself on my journey. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
okay to not be like that all the
And a
time.
lot of anxiety comes from either past or future. It's like this stuff happened to me in the past, or I'm anxious that this stuff is going to happen to me in the future, this bad stuff. But like if he says, if you can just be in the now, you can potentially, if you can really be in the now, a lot of that stuff drops away because you're not thinking about future things that might come up and you're not thinking about the past stuff that's happened to you. You're just being in the present moment. And if the present moment is okay, then you're okay.
Right.
It's a lot easier said than done,
Oh, yeah.
but I agree that's an ideal technique.
Teresa says, "This is really a great chat. I'm getting so much out of it today." Brianna says, "Wow, that's cool. Thank you." Al says, "I have a pretty good feeling that the Dead Ma 5, pronounced dead mouse, okay,
Yeah.
guy is a practitioner. It's alleged his backyard has a inlaid stone pinnacle platform with a fire pit in the center. How fun." So Oki says, "Yes, I've learned that whenever I carry a weapon, knife, pepper spray, etc., I can use it to defend myself in my dreams, and I love my dream ejection button. Thank you, Ian. I will carry my ninja pentagram stars." That sounds awesome. And again, thank you, Teresa. And Carlos says, "Laugh my ass off." Ian. Oki says, "Amazing chat. Thank you, Siofra and Ian, for cultivating an amazing community. I'm happy that I'm not the only one interested in this mystical world. Yeah, isn't it nice to know you're not completely alone and you're not completely crazy?" Gabrielle says, "Yep, I like his lectures a lot. Eckhart is a gem. People overlook it because it's simple, but peace is priceless. And you're right, I'd rather have peace than powers." Yeah, no kidding. Something you can take with you.
Yep.
It's definitely one of those things. It's like, yay.
But one might argue that that piece is a power of its own, and
It
it's pretty
is.
powerful what it can do for you. I mean, it's benefited him greatly.
Well, I mean, if you're at ease in your life, we all have conflict that arise, and we all have things that are getting, obstacles that we have to overcome. That's just part of life. It's just the way the world works. It's not a judgment call on you as a person or an individual. It's just that's the way the world works. The trick is being able to face those obstacles and then figure out how to get around them or make them work for you. And that determines how you think about your life, helps to determine whether those obstacles are seen as an annoyance or something in your way or an opportunity. So the way we view these things can make a huge difference in their impact on us. And, it's like I'm always solution oriented. That's kind of one of my foundational principles, I think. If I have a problem, try to find out, is there a solution to this? Is there some way I can change and what can I do and so forth? Um, yeah. Gabrielle says, "I remember you guys first mentioned the ninja pentagramming throwing. I was like, what? You can do that?" You can do anything in your dreams.
Yeah, I think the reason I learned to do it was just because I went through a phase where I was having a whole bunch of really bad dreams all the time, and I just kind of learned to do it out of that. I think out of self defense.
Okay, says, "If we ever wanted to send you or Ian a gift, art, music, how can we do that?" Or you can send me an email at siofrasmagicalcove@gmail.com, and then we can work out details. Not on a live show. So send me an email if you want to send us something. Yeah. And it's I've gotten, I mean, we had the gift of that magical fiber. Somebody wanted to send it to me, so I gave them my address so they could send it to me. And ironically, it went to the house across the street. But then she brought it over, so it worked. Like, wow, our mailman is sometimes not very astute. He just goes like, throw this around here.
This looks close enough.
It's close enough. That's right.
Yeah.
But hey, we always appreciate the support. And yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, so I've been at this for 70 years now. If I, 71 years if I go back to when I remembered my past lives and knew I had magic in me and stuff like that, and was seeing fairies and so forth. So I have like a different kind of perspective on this than the average person. And hopefully my perspective helps people when they're trying to figure this stuff out. That's sort of what my goal is to offer assistance for people to figure out what they want to do for themselves, because it's all about personal empowerment. Not mine, but everyone else's. I have my own already. But yeah, the kind of person you want to be. That's what I decided I wanted to be a person I could be proud of, and so then I started working like crazy to do that, because I had a rough beginning. And then, the choices that you make a difference is how things turn out. Teresa says, your neighbor actually came into your yard with all those pentagrams. Yeah, well, she was in our group for a while, so she knows about them. She was actually in our temple before, so she was part of our group for a bit. She wasn't afraid of coming into my yard. Yeah. I'm going to have to get that plaque down. I have to refresh it because it's been out in the weather for a couple of years now. So it needs to be cleaned up and refreshed. The one on my door is still in perfect shape.
Algae grows on anything around
it
here.
Loves,
Cars, it doesn't care.
It doesn't matter. But yeah, our neighbor knew us. And so it worked. It was about the amethyst crystal web, right? And that's about making connections and sending energy around and so forth. And so we reconnected and, reestablished a little bit of a link there when the neighbor, when she had to come over to give us our mail. And it turned out to be that was the mail she was giving us. Oki says, what's a technique you can use to reduce procrastination and improve work ethic? Find something that you're really interested in and want to do. Forgive yourself when you're not interested. Pay attention to your body rhythms. Brianna says, can you hide yourself or your energy from other practitioners so they can't read cards on you? Well, I think you can. Yeah, you can make yourself invisible, but you got to be able to protect yourself first, so work on that. And, it's just rude to read cards for other people without their permission. So if they're doing that without your permission, then you don't want to have anything to do with them anyway. So it would be a matter of self-defense to, sort of like protecting yourself. Teresa says, I've been thinking you need an amethyst spider for that web, but you don't like spiders. I never said I didn't like spiders. I just said it's not a spider. It's just calling it a web because it's a network web, but it has nothing to do with spiders.
But I don't think a spider would be harm either.
And I don't think a spider would be bad, but it's not about the spiders. It's just about the amethysts. So you want to send me an amethyst spider, feel free, and I'll put it on there with all the other amethysts, and it can weave its wonders on the other side. But yeah. So we're pretty much at the end of our show. It's been almost exactly an hour and a half. Yep.
Okay.
So unfortunately, it's probably a good time to stop. He says, but the spiders will help make the web bigger. I don't think there's a spider big enough to weave the entire planet. So I don't think that works. Gabrielle says, I never thought of spiders with that. Yeah, me neither.
Egregore, let's make a giant spider
Egregore.
Sorry.
And freak out all the people who are afraid of spiders. So that'd be fun. I see that in the sky coming. I'm being like, nah. Brianna says, thank you so much for answering my questions. This helped a lot. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
And Violet says, bye, guys. And Gabriel says, that's cute, Teresa.
Bye all.
Okay, guys. Thank you for being here. And we'll decide what I'm going to be doing a video on this coming week. Vicky says, I hope there isn't a spider that big. Yeah, me too. The space spider coming to suck the earth. Put it in its web. Yeah, that would be fun. Beth says, blessed be everyone. Great live. And Oki says, thank you, peace and blessings. Enjoy the remainder of your day. And Al says, bye. Carlos says, thanks, Siofra and Ian. Bye, guys. Teresa says, hearts. Ickles says, thank you. Have a lovely week. Ian says, bye, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for being great today. And Gabriel says, bye. All right.